Hello, guys. Welcome to Smart, Intellectual, Knowledgeable African. I'm Philip, S.I.K.A. This episode is part of the series of episodes dedicated to addressing or actually reflecting upon the issue of climate change from an African perspective. And in the previous episode, I talked about climate justice. I tried giving you a simple definition of the concept. I also tried giving you a picture of how the climate change situation is portraying in terms of polluting countries so that it will help us have a clear understanding of the relevance of this topic, climate justice. In this episode, I'm going to try and give you my opinion on whether we should emphasize the need of having solutions that are actually allocated based on countries' responsibility towards climate change. Well, this is a very difficult question. I'm not going to lie. It is a very difficult question because on one hand, we have the issue of fairness, but climate change is not an issue like any other issues. One difference is, unlike some other issues that may be country-based or geography-based, climate change is a global concern. Therefore, it means that whether or not a specific country or a specific region is not willing to address the issue and face its responsibility towards finding a solution, the issue will first remain, and second, dramatically escalate, and third, the entire human race and the earth as a whole will continue to be negatively impacted by that issue. So that is one of the key elements that actually renders reflecting upon climate justice a very challenging topic. But it does not mean that we should not ask ourselves, that kind of question, especially as young intellectual African and leaders of tomorrow. It is very important to start engaging with, that kind of difficult topic. So, like I said, we are in a situation where first 7 countries are responsible for almost 50% of greenhouse gas emission, while 54 African countries are responsible for less than 4% of the GHG emission. Please, when I say GHG, it is just an acronym for greenhouse gas. I'm going to use that acronym throughout this episode so that, it helps me be less wordy in my analysis. So, back to the issue of climate justice. Climate justice has been on the table for quite some time. And what we've seen first is a global acknowledgement of developed countries to actually tackle the issue. Second, they also pledges to allocate some millions and billions of dollars annually to African countries so that they can mitigate the climate change impact on their respective country. The third action they also agreed to take was to help create a global framework to discuss the climate change issue under, the Paris Agreement, for instance. You also have the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, the UN climate, the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. So those are solutions that developed countries on one hand and the international community on the other end agreed to come up with. But let's look at the practicality. How practical can we become when trying to tackle the issue of climate change while trying to consider the new concept of climate justice? Development is inevitable. For Africa to actually improve the social and economic welfare of its population, it needs to become more developed. And the mediums of assessing development are inevitably based on the condition of having strong, competitive, and industrialized, sectors in energy, in transport, in agriculture, etc. Africa needs to have strong industry. But that also takes us back to the issue of GHG, because one may not have industry without thinking of GHG, since those industries are actually large polluter because of their strong reliance on fossil fuels energy. Although there are actually alternative solutions being developed through renewable energy solutions, but we also need to consider the transition period. While we are busy developing and implementing those renewable energy solutions and projects worldwide, we also need to consider a transition time and transition phase to make sure that we can either shut down, those former solutions based on fossil fuels energy, or we can change them completely and make them work on a new source of energy, which is renewable energy. Either way, we need to factoring the transitioning time that this huge shift in the world of development and industrialization, that implementing such solution may represent. And to me, it will be nice to come to a situation where, of course, those who contributed the most to polluting the earth contribute also more financially to actually find a solution. But the problem with this approach is that can Africa afford the time to wait any longer? Because right now, we are in a situation where those or some of the developed countries or economies have pledged towards helping finding solutions. They also pledged towards making more contribution, larger contribution compared to other nations. But these are just words or speeches. In reality, none of the millions or billions or extra millions of dollars, pledged to African country ever seen the light of the day. So the question here is that Africa has the luxury to wait, that Africa has the means to actually pressure or lobby, to make sure that those promises made years ago actually come to reality. And that is what is more concerning to me. And based on the current situation, it is very difficult because while we are waiting as the African continent, we are also facing a reality where we may not be able to catch up with the economic and development progress that other countries are making. Developed countries are already far ahead in the development race. But there are other countries that are actually at a level that is still not impossible for Africa to reach. I'm talking about emerging economies. Many African countries today, such as Ivory Coast, Nigeria, South Africa, Egypt, Morocco, are in a position where, if well equipped, they have a strong potential of becoming emerging economies in the next 10, 20 to 30 years. But the key question is, can Africa afford to wait to actually make sure that climate justice is applied when it comes to the solution? My answer is actually twofold. I think, first, I think that Africa cannot afford itself the luxury to wait because of the development agenda, the global development agenda that is already set in motion, but because our generation is ready to contribute, ready to actually help the continent make the development shift that it needs. And the second aspect of my question is, yes, Africa cannot afford itself the luxury to wait But that doesn't mean Africa should forget to lobby and to make a case and to continue making a case until the biggest and largest polluter and responsible of GHG emission face their responsibility and accept endorsing their financial responsibility and commitment towards making a fairer, you know, climate environment in Africa. Please let me know your thoughts, what you think about climate justice. I hope this episode has been enlightening to you. Thank you for listening to Smart Intellectual Knowledge About African, the podcast where strong realities meet powerful perspectives. À bientôt.